Other four Messans Mamunina Paba at the bar chromatic, Mamunisa chromatic, the airport. Dear Bana Benia BB, first for the bull and 71, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia Wapako set the biggest report pan ewa manoni other four. Just say program kesi be a course so ewa abrochi memu no mu invite Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia just say na wo hwe Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia ni delivery na send ye bisa ne question na osiji ano ye bisa na ha na odi atoa ye bisa na ha na odi atoa the sense of speaking and the sense of answering questions no HSF papa no na adwimu edo yi pound for sana manema we kosona na chese mo amuni controversial journalist bia wagidin ewo wiase afane nyina a ye friend Manase Azuri chese Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia ni forum na chese oko deliver ni speech no Manase Azuri kra wa babontin kra be bona baso osha caption na wa hase no say you may be of a different political persuasion but you can't deny the fact that Dr. Bawumia is brainy and knows his stuff. Just said Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia ne seminar de tutu dwa program na se no Manase Azuri wa babontin no Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia ni nim de ne de ebru nim de nyina so just say onankasa kra no onim ni public media to Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia because wa beni yi papa no wa beni yi ankasa do fo bo man kan in caption ka krebi wa ase na yentu aso mo say Manase Azuri praises Dr. Bawumia after impactful lecture at 2025 IDU Forum, Brussels, Belgium. A course of Brussels, Belgium, Chese, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia no kupie mo and a chese okose honum kra perfefe. And as a renowned Ghanaian investigative journalist and social commentator, Manase Azuri Awuni has lauded Vice President Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia for what he described as a remarkably intelligent and data-driven presentation. She said Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia in the presentation of Brussels no Manase Azuri Obabontino what describing the presentation as remarkably intelligent and data-driven presentation. At here, when they caption na Manase Azuri, Ediama Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia presentation no, out of 4 video no mensaka pese making kind na man wo hon the brain to man ko na yenko tie aye presentation na Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia okoye Brussels, Belgium me muni embassy.
Mr. Bawumia, you are representing the African continent. So my question is, how is the weaponization of trade affecting the African economies, particularly Ghana, and what strategies are being considered to strengthen the economic resilience of the African continent?
Thank you very much. I don't know if everyone can hear me. Let's put this in a broader context. I think that one of the things that policymakers are doing recently is a failure to understand the lessons of history as well as the lessons of economics. There are surely trade imbalances. If you look at the share of global trade in terms of exports and imports, Africa has about 2.5% of global exports, has 2.9% of global imports. Asia has 43% of global exports and 38% of global imports. China, 15% of exports, 10% of imports. Europe, you have 38% of exports and 51% of imports. America, 8% of exports and 14% of imports. So there are clearly trade imbalances across the various continents and countries. But what we know from economics is that you cannot fix a trade deficit with tariffs. It just doesn't work. I mean, if you look at the national income identity, where you say that your income is equal to your consumption investment, government spending plus exports minus imports. That breaks down into a simple equation, which is a truism, that your deficit, the exports minus your imports, would necessarily have to equal the difference between your savings and investment. So for any country which spends more than it saves, you're going to get a trade deficit. The deficit is a macroeconomic problem. It's not a trade policy issue. And you cannot solve that macroeconomic problem with trade policy like tariffs. So you go back, to the Smoot-Hawley Acts of the 1930s, where they put 20% tariffs. You had a Great Depression. And that is what happened recently with China and the US, 2018, 2019. Again, we had the impact, which was negative for global trade. What the US has done recently is increase the average tariff rate from about 2.4% to 10%. This is the largest increase in tariffs since 1943. And the impact will not be small. It will not be insignificant. Thankfully for Africa, our exports to the United States is about 6.5%. And our imports from the United States is about 4.4%. So we are not as exposed in the broader sense as many other places. But within that context, countries like Lesotho, which have exports in terms of textile exports to the United States, it's about 50% of their exports. And they are benefiting from the African Growth and Opportunities Act, which is AGOA. And these countries are going to be affected very significantly. When you have 50% of your exports, and AGOA is basically going to collapse under these tariffs. So what is you're going to see in Africa, as you're seeing across the world, there's going to be more of a clamor and for self-reliance. And you're going to see a bit more of political space for countries to have more intra-African trade as a way of dealing with this. Currently, our intra-African trade is between 17 and 20%. But I think that as you see a more relook at supply chains within the continent and globally, you're going to see, as you see in Europe, there's an increasing sense that, there's been a decoupling of the US-European relationship, and Europe is going to look at its supply chains again, as every other player in this world is going to do. And so Africa is going to look at our supply chains again as a way of looking at it. But at the end of the day, you have to make sure that the macro balances are the ones guiding your trade policy and not tariffs. The tariff rates are not the ones that actually determine the effectiveness of your deficit outcomes.
Mr. Bawumia, I'd like to come back to you and also address China and its role in the African continent. As we know, the role of China in Africa is growing. Do you see African countries deepening trade ties with China in response to rising global protectionism, or are we more likely to see some sort of push for diversification, including partnerships with Europe and possibly other regions as well?
Thank you very much. I think that if you look at what has happened, the whole rules-based order has been disrupted. And there has been a lot of, and there is ongoing, a lot of realignment. I mean, old allies are no longer being seen as allies. And so what has been injected in the whole system is uncertainty and the lack of predictability. And so partnerships are no longer as straightforward as they used to be. China has a major trade participation in Africa. In Ghana, for example, China is our largest trading partner as well as our largest foreign investor. And it is the same for many countries. So I don't see that changing anytime soon. But African countries are going to look at what works for them and diversify accordingly, because the rules-based order, as I said, is something that no longer really exists at the moment, and we have to work back towards that. But as I said, for us on the continent, there has to be a major play for self-reliance in a lot of ways, so that it's not necessarily China or America or Europe, but you've got to really look at your own internal economic dynamics and bring in more value addition to our raw materials, so that you can create jobs for the youth. And so the issue is not east or west, or it's just going forward with Africa for us. Yeah.
With this, I have a closing question to all of the panelists. In 4 years, what would be more important, tariffs or trust? I'm asking about trust because trust is important in politics, in trade, everywhere. So what's your take on it?
For me, I think that trust is going to be more important than tariffs. Tariffs are not going to be sustainable, and we will soon all find out that it's a rush to the lowest common denominator. I think that the evidence that we have over history shows that tariffs don't work. But what we don't have now is trust. I mean, people talk about mutually assured destruction for nuclear powers, but today what you have is mutually assured suspicions across the countries, because Europe is very suspicious of Russia, the US is very suspicious of China, Australia is very suspicious of China. Now, when you have to negotiate trade agreements of security threats at the background, the efficiency with which you will negotiate them will be compromised, because you are thinking security. And if I agree that, okay, I'll take off these barriers, maybe I might compromise my security. And so we need, at a diplomatic level, to address why is this suspicion. Can we deal with this suspicion between the major powers? And I think that if you don't deal with this, you will have suboptimal trade policies in the end, because they are really a cover for dealing with the security issues.
Thank you.
So trust becomes fundamental.
Other format in seminar, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia Ekanye, Chese, the delivery no way in sema okopie mu ewa manone forum kesiepa the International Democratic Union the IDU, the International Democratic Union IDU forum kesiepa mo ye Brussels Belgium. And Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia kopie mu na chese ohwe ni delivery na ena the controversial journalist or Ghana asi Manase Azuri waba bontino si Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia we nyina chese unim die na osropa na wabɔ na baso kese pa be so be di nyina brɛ wɔ acromatic so for more repeat be like na subscribe na share na hit notification bell no so am say na be abrini abibia do pie content awo we nya ne tempa na ahwe reti am see ade be Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia ne nsɛm nya be si wɔ ha ɛwɔ acromatic so makra mo nyina mdamu nyina se